What was that, 4 years ago? 3 years ago. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our PMP meeting this afternoon. I would like to call the meeting to order at 1 p.m. And as the agenda has been circulated, is there any added items? I have not received any. Any added items to the agenda? None. Moving on to 1B, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I move that we adopt the agenda for the Policies and Priorities Committee regular meeting for Monday, March 6th, 2023.
Thank you for that. Call for the vote. Agenda is adopted. Moving on to item number 2, adoption of the previous minutes. May I get a motion on the floor for that? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I make the motion that we adopt the previous minutes of the Policies and Priority Committee minutes.
Thank you. Any questions, amendments, changes? None? I'll ask the question then. All those in favor? All in favor. So those are adopted. Thank you. Moving on to the next item number 3, business arising out of the minutes. There's nothing on the agenda for that. So item number 4, presentation and delegations. I'll turn it over to CAO Williams for introductions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. So coming out of our FCSS changes earlier this year, where we had some adjustments to our funding agreement with the province, and as Council recalls, we did away with the FCSS formal appointed board at public at large. We're continuing with that conversation around what should the town's FCSS program look like, or what could it look like, based on some updated changes from the province, who was the main funder at 80% of FCSS, and the town and county contribute the remaining 20%. And with us today to provide council with an overview of one potential option and plus some background information to support decision making is Heather Dixon with our Community Services Department. Heather, step on up.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dahl and Deputy Mayor Daley, as well as Council and Administration. Thank you for having me here. So today we're just going to do a little overview of FCSS and a possibility of a way to deliver our FCSS program. So as CAO Williams mentioned, the FCSS program is actually a financial partnership between the Government of Alberta and municipalities and Métis settlements. So 80% of that funding comes from the province, with 20% being rounded out by each municipality. The inception of FCSS is long-standing in Alberta. It was first put together in 1966. So recently, the province has released a new framework, and within that framework, they have, for the first time, put a definition behind what it means for social preventative programs. So it is to improve the well-beings of individuals, families, and communities, but it is to be a proactive process that strengthens the proactive factors of individuals, families, and communities to promote well-being, reduce vulnerabilities, enhance quality of life, and empowers them then to meet the challenges of life. So, and And then finally, FCSS is recognized throughout the province by many people, and it's recognized as a place to come to get information and referrals and to access different social supports for their families throughout the ages. So starting right from small little wee children all the way up to seniors. So in December of 2022, we were sent our new funding agreement. They now do a 3-year funding cycle with the municipalities. And they also then released something called the Family and Community Support Services Accountability Framework. So FCSS follows under the Ministry of Seniors, Community and Social Services, and some of the work that they've been doing in the last year on this accountability framework was to have some priorities. So you'll see across the top there in blue are the 5 priorities that the province has laid out for FCSS. Now, when we look at these, we know that as FCSS being preventative, we can't intervene on some of these situations when someone is in the midst of these crises, but certainly as a prevention-based program, we can offer services, programs, and projects around these things that help people not have to access these services once they get into that intervention stage. So the strategies that you see in the box below those 5 priorities are ways that our programs and projects help battle some of that. So an example I can give you quickly for mental health and addictions. So how are we preventative? How do we become preventative in that? Is teaching people coping skills, helping them identify when maybe they or a loved one is entering into some mental health issues, be it depression, anxiety, those types of things. So working with groups that we fund or working within our own programs that we can run internally to hit some of those preventative measures and programs. And then finally, something that's important for us to understand too is that there is a lot of reporting that goes into FCSS, not just provincial financial reporting. That's obviously very important. That's done yearly. But also we have an outcome measure reporting component. So any program that is funded with FCSS dollars must have an outcome that they meet. And how do we know that they meet them? Well, they've got to ask certain questions that are laid out in an outcome measures bank to each participant of programs. And we are looking for, a fairly good percentage, 75% and above, of people increasing their knowledge around certain activities, be it increasing connection within the community or increasing their knowledge of mental health, coping skills, whatever program that is, we want to see a good increase in their knowledge and understanding of that particular outcome. So currently, one of the delightful things about FCSS is that the province understands that every single municipality is different and that there are different ways to deliver our FCSS programs. There is the applications and grants, so that is a funding out only model. So you would have an administration cost within your office to administer that program, but most of your money would then be funded out to groups that meet that FCSS mandate that's laid out in the Act and regulation. The other one is a blended delivery program, which we have become a little bit more that way, not completely equal, but we do a few programs. We do a subsidized housekeeping, subsidized counseling, and then, of course, the Great Neighbors program, and some things around volunteerism. And then finally, the last model of delivery is internal programming only. So obviously that speaks for itself. We're not funding out any money at all, is how that would work, and all the programs are run internally by staff. So those are the 3 models, and we're going to move on, and we will get to my recommendation about a delivery model for us here. But first, I just want to go over a little bit of a mini community needs assessment that I did. We put this out on social media, but we also had some hard copies here at the town, at the library, and as well at the Aquatic Center for people who may not access social media or the websites easily. We had it out for a week, and we had a fairly good rate of feedback for a survey. And so I've just put a few things together here for you to look at. This first slide here is the community feedback. So we've got 73% of people, sorry, I gotta put my glasses on. I'm just learning that I can't always read the small print. All right, so here we go. So 88% of respondents were aware that substance abuse and addictions were an issue in our community, but only 37% were aware of where to find help for that. So again, the next one there is isolation. We had 73% of people were aware of that isolation's an issue in our community, be it with seniors or newcomers to Canada, or even stay-at-home parents. But only 15% knew where to find access to get support for those. So similarly, here we had relationship breakdown. So we're talking anywhere from divorces to family breakdown between moms and children or siblings, and only 13% knew where to access support. So, and you can see there on this slide that anything in blue is where people realized that this is an issue in our community, and the yellow is where they knew where they knew to go to find help. So that was a little alarming for me to see that they didn't really know where to find support for those. The next slide we did was with local agencies. So these are the groups that attend our interagency meetings. We have those quarterly, and we hold them currently at the library. So we have different groups that attend that, from anywhere from Alberta Health Services representatives to the local coalition on substance abuse, people from outside of Olds who satellite in services like the Sexual Health Assault Center, the Career Assistance Network. Those are the type of people that we sent this one to. So the results from that were 57% of those people that satellite their services into Olds with social programming, or people that are currently in Olds, are looking for an office space that they can use to touch base and meet with their clients. We also talked to them about the need for board room space. We have a number of groups that always look for meeting space. And so 50% of them said that they could utilize a free boardroom space. 64% are looking for places to run their programs. So these programs could be anything from a parent-child program to a teen program, Mountain View Moccasin House when they do their ribbon skirt classes. It can even be groups that are doing support groups for people that might have an addiction issue. Then we had people, 64% needed a private space to meet with clients, so maybe counseling, things like that. 62% let us know that they've been in a situation within, the recent history here where they were unsure of where to find the support service within Olds that their client needed. So again, that kind of echoes what we heard from the people, the community members, is that trying to find those services seemed to be a little bit difficult here in our community. And then finally, we asked them if they felt that Olds would benefit from having a permanent location where you could find information and referral or supports and services. And we had a large response with 75% saying they felt that would be a great thing. So we also had 87% of the community respondents felt the same way, that there needed to be a permanent location that offers information and referral of social programs that was easy to find and accessible. So when we got that information back, we had already been in our department talking about how can we better serve the people of Olds. We hear a lot of things around there being issues with mental health, with suicide, with, parents parenting, because there's always new challenges with it every single generation when we're trying to parenting. It's never the same. And so when we heard all of these things and did this little mini feedback, we came together as a team, and we thought of the Olds Community Connection Center. So this is our idea for a way that we could service our community better. The Olds Community Connection Center would be a community-based organization that is part of the town of Olds, and it will be funded by the FCSS grant dollars from the partnership between the province of Alberta, the town of Olds, and Mountain View County. So again, that is not coming out of the taxpayer's pocket, that is the FCSS grant. So we came up with a vision of what this Community Connection Center would have, and then that's through supportive, preventative, and locally driven programs. The Olds Community Connection Center will enhance the well-being of individuals, families, and our community, making Olds a connected, thriving, engaged, and inclusive community. And our mission would be to create a resource center that will foster and strengthen our community through offering quality programs and services, as well as build and sustain strong partnerships with other local social program providers. So the Community Connection Center would then be a hub for people of Olds and area. It's almost like an idea of a one-stop shop where people can find referrals and services. They can access different types of social programming, have a boardroom that would be able to be used for nonprofits, a youth center possibly right within that through a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club and the Youth Advisory Council, access to subsidized counseling or housekeeping, senior support, and so very much more. Our team has done some research into possible sites that are available in the uptown area, making this center extremely accessible for people that may be walking, and easily found for those who are new to the community. And we've had multiple letters of support that we've received from different community groups, such as Boys and Girls Club of Olds and Area, Mountain View Emergency Shelter Society, the Moccasin House Sexual Assault Center of Central Alberta, the Rural Mental Health Project, Olds and Area Special Family Voices, Mountain View Family Resource Network, and the Olds and Area Substance Abuse Coalition. So a very important question will be next. It sounds great. We can do all of these great things for our community and reach a lot of people and use a lot of what we're doing to make sure we're hitting those provincial priorities that we mentioned at the very beginning. But you'll want to know some of the financial impacts. So I have gone through and done a bit of work. So being a blended delivery, because we don't want to take away some of that funding that we're giving out now to, say, the Boys and Girls Club and some of those, those programs in our community that are doing great things. So what I'm proposing is to do a blended delivery, a little more than what we do now. So a breakdown of revenue for FCSS currently is a $230,100. So sorry, let me say that again. Yeah, I'll just say $230,000 from the province. The town contribution has to be 20% of that, which comes out to be $58,118. And Sheena's very precise and very good at those numbers. So then finally, we have a contribution from Mountain View County of $48,365. That's to help us with programming for people that might live right outside of Olds and access services within our town. So the expenses that I've looked at is still keeping that application process open, so budgeting $75,000 in our annual budget to use for external grants to our community. And then internally, we're looking at doing about $52,000 of that annual budget for internal programs. So the subsidized counseling again, the housekeeping program, Great Neighbors program, the Youth Advisory Committee, volunteer appreciation event, information and referrals, and of course, in this center, we would love to be able to do more with our volunteerism and connecting people to different groups that need those volunteers and doing some training and recognition and things like that for different volunteers. Then we had some other non-negotiables like wages, benefits, training, office supplies, and our FCSS AA membership. That came to $1,133. Am I saying that right? It is Monday. Somebody help me. Come on. Yeah, 100,000. There we go. $114,833. Thank you for that help. So that leaves about $90,000 left over in that FCSS budget that could be used for rent, utilities, repairs, and maintenance. And then also, that would leave a little bit for some extra programming as well, possibly on top of what we've had above in our internal programs. And some of the nice things about having this space is we're actually also servicing some other groups in a different way. So we're able to help them with their office space, with their free, having a free spot for them to meet, having people come from out of town who are looking for that spot, like from the Sexual Assault Center. So we have those programs within our community and people know where to find them and that they're regularly there. So they would be there like on every Tuesday and Thursday of the month, or, they would pick a day and we would have a special office for them that is bookable. So they would be able to do that on an ongoing basis. And that's a great way to provide some support for some of these other local groups and being able to give more services to our community. So that's kind of just like a brief overview of kind of what we've looked at. Now, our team has looked at a few places that are available in Uptown Olds. We have a couple more to look at still that have recently become available, but there are some spots there that would be ideal for offices, programming space, the youth center, and a boardroom that would all be in one local office. So, and then finally, what's next? Well, what's next is we have given council a little bit of a taste of what our thoughts are about a direction for FCSS and how we could service our community. So obviously, council direction from you. The second step would be confirming a location in Upton Olds, and then finally moving forward and opening up a community connection center. So that is all I have, and now if you have questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dixon, for doing that. Very informative report, and it does highlight a lot of the needs within our community, and I think an efficient way of addressing them. So I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Blatz first, and then Mayor Judy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and thank you, Ms. Dixon. That's a very informative, very good presentation. What would the staff complement look like for this type of a facility based from our employees per se?
So that would involve taking myself and the two community facilitators out of this building and over into the Connection Center. So that would be myself, Gary Gaudette, and April Webb. It would also take, not employee-wise, but the Sunshine Bus volunteers. They would also be over there with us. And then just some volunteers as well. We've had some people step up and would like to volunteer to be the front reception people. So there are some different volunteer opportunities over there as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Judy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. When you were speaking to the local agency feedback, you mentioned new challenges with every generation. Can you elaborate on that for me, please?
Certainly. So we have some issues within our school around, obviously, some social media issues. So that's new. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. But I didn't have these issues, and they were just starting to kind of come in when my kids were in high school. Now we're having some of these issues with things like inappropriate photos and sharing on social media that are happening in our middle school. That's grade 4 to 8. You know, these kids have a whole access to things that we never did. And as parents, we need to support our parents in helping them kind of navigate some of these new challenges. Even, lots of people say, we don't have drugs in olds. I hear that often, but we do. And we need to be educating our kids and our parents about how to navigate these things. And it's not the old time things that, I can remember way back in high school, people dabbling here and there. These are things that if you dabble, you're addicted from the get-go. There's not, some of them are not a road you want your kids to go down. So educating our parents and helping them navigate some of what's out there and understanding what it is and the importance of, the youth center. If we had that, the kids will be so much more plugged in and connected. Some of our kids that are looking for those relationships outside home and have some positive mentorship and relationship there. So it's just it's hard to be a parent no matter when, but every generation, every time brings us new challenges. So that's just some of them.
Thank you. That's very encouraging information to share with the public as well.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I have a question with regards to, I suppose, the administration costs that you had mentioned at the $114,000. Do you see that would have any kind of increase when you are looking at operating a different facility outside of the town office? You would have costs due to scheduling and operating the space. So do you see any increase in that simply because you're looking at having to operate a building that would add on to the workload?
So that's where some of our volunteerism has come in. We have a number of people in our community who have retired and recently and have some of these skills around administration and reception and things like that and are looking for a place to fit in our community. So that's currently what we're looking at. I can't speak to future because I don't know what that's going to look like. Our community might, if we increase in our size, in our demographics, like those things are unknowns to me at this point, but we don't need, at this time, we're not looking at hiring an admin position for this building. Yes, because between the three of us and having some volunteers there's also other groups that are looking at using the office as well and having an office there will be covered.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just have a couple short snappers as far as questions goes. Hopefully I'll be permitted. One question is, so what are the hours of operation of this remote facility center? Is it normal business hours, 8 to 5? Is it going to stretch into the evening? And then what do we do about staffing for the evening?
So currently, our staff does work evenings in my department, and sometimes that looks like us just kind of spelling each other off, and that would continue. So, for example, Gary does the Youth Advisory Committee. They meet in the evening, right? Because they meet after school or in the evening. And so Gary would then be the one that was there for that meeting, and then he would most likely come in later the next morning. So there's still April and I would be in the building as well as a volunteer, the Sunshine Bus people. So that kind of thing, we're pretty good at spelling each other off and flexing our time so that we're doing what we're supposed to be.
If I may be
Supplemental?
permitted, unless somebody else has another question. Okay, go ahead.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daley, and thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm just wondering about having the three community facilitators. Like, I know that you're involved quite a lot in the FCSS and all that entails, but community facilitators also do other things. Like you assist with it, pretty much help run Canada Day. The community showcase gets organized, I would imagine, through your. So how do we balance that off with those community facilitators no longer in our building and being accessible here?
So certainly, we're doing the same thing there that we are here. We're still doing Canada Day. Community Registration and Information Night is an internal FCSS thing now. So that OI used to do that, but that is very much fits within FCSS mandates. And so last year, the last few years, well, last year we did it. Previously, it was our our recreation programmer. So we did have to take a good hard look at what we can do and what we can't do, just because we just have the three of us now. But we've kind of taken that all into account when we've been looking at this and know what we internally have as some priorities that also work along with council's strategic priorities as well. So we had to kind of go through that and look at what as we as a FCSS in Olds, what are our priorities going to be too, so.
Thank you. And the Great Neighbors Program, that is part of the FCSS budgeting? Oh, okay. Thank you.
CEO Williams would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just on Councillor Ryan's question and Heather's response, I just wanted to add one thing that we're still trying to work out. It's not totally clear yet, is cemeteries. That the community facilitators are still in charge of managing the cemetery from booking until coordination with Public Works. And the only gray area there is that people come generally here to book cemetery plots. So I mean, it can still happen, and it really is just more of a meet and greet, the first step, so to speak. And that's just one area of the logistics that we're still trying to map out. But everything else that the three facilitators do is either in conjunction with this office or the other offices in town. So we don't see much issue with that interdepartmental collaboration changing.
And if I can, too, with cemetery, I took cemetery over when Catherine left last year, and then have taught Gary how to do the cemetery items. And generally, people make appointments, or we get a phone call from one of the funeral homes. We have been logging some of our walk-ins, and that has decreased. People are more and more making those appointments, and that's just will be an education piece for people that they now go to the Community Connection Center. And the other nice thing about meeting them there is then we have the ability to right there connect them with brochures and information that might help them through some counseling services or hospice with they run some great grief programs through hospice. And so having that ability to connect them there for things that are even over and above just, kind of the logistics of that.
Mayor Dahl?
Thank you. With regards to the cemetery piece, perhaps our CEO or yourself can answer this, but how does the record-keeping work for that? Is that going to be all done by technology? Because I know a lot of it's stored here right now.
So currently, we've just been working this last, 8 months, and we've transposed everything that was paper into our Stone Orchard program. And into our shared drive. So all of our historical information is all on a software program. Now, we still have it here in paper form in our records, but it is all there. So we've been working really hard to get that online. So, yeah, and we're working actually at, just to squirrel for a minute, we're also working at making things a little friendlier there for our public to find loved ones and things like that through some new technology.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor.
But CEO Williams actually answered my question before I had an opportunity to ask it, so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, thanks, Heather, for the presentation. I just have another question or two, if I may. And one is, can you help me understand, you mentioned as far as the cost structure goes, 75,000 roughly for external grants. What does that mean? What does that look like exactly? Is that somebody applying for, consolidating and applying for the grants? So that's a manpower cost.
And that's what we do right now. So
person cost, I
yeah,
guess.
so in January, I brought forward our recommendations to council for external grant funding. And so it will look exactly the same as that. There will be an application process that's done in the fall, and then we go through them, make sure that the applications fit within the mandates, and then bring it to council for recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Further question, if I may?
Open the floor to anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. And then just a follow-up to that question of Councillor Wilson's. So the external grant that you're earmarking at the 75,000, I know it's much higher that we were giving out in January. I believe it was a bit higher than that, was it not? And do you feel that it would be detrimental to reducing that amount, or are we just not getting enough requests for this funding?
So in the town of Olds, we don't get as many requests for funding that we have earmarked for funding out in the past, which, like this year, for example, I think we funded out 110,000. 15 of that, was a group that wouldn't have batted an eye if they didn't get that funding. It was just a kind of an icing on the cake for them. And they are run through a different ministry as well. So we do have some opportunity there, and there's some ability to change that. The other thing important to note is that groups that get FCSS funding are not to rely on FCSS funding from year to year. And they also know that if you ask, say, for, say, $55,000, you may not get that. So you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So there are those things that are made very plain by the province and by FCSS organizations around the province.
CAO Williams, comment?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and just to do the same thing, to elaborate a bit. I would say, in my opinion, the biggest adverse effect of adopting such a model is that you're essentially cutting that community grant stream. But as Heather alluded to, we do tend to have more dollars available for allocation than we do have available eligible organizations under the FCSS parameters to accept the dollars. So there's two things in that. The first is that, in my interpretation of this proposal, we're not eliminating funding, we're just funding a different mechanism, and that is space instead of dollars, in the realm of, I would say, $35,000 annually at this point. Of course, the unknown is if the demand grows in future years, or if the demand shrinks in different years, that current $35,000 estimate will obviously change. But right now it is that space instead of dollars, and that was based on that community assessment, largely with the organizations as well, and hopefully trying to meet outcomes in the community needs side of addressing how to access services, which, and not just the growing issues that Mayor Dahl asked about with new generations, but also, as we have the largest generation in history aging right now into retirement and whatnot, that single location, I think, does provide some value. So just want to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And so, again, just to confirm, Heather, so at the end of the day, if we go down this path, this is really budget neutral, right? There is no incremental cost to the town?
Correct.
Okay.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and through you to Ms. Dixon. So is this model similar to what the Greenwood Neighborhood Place does in Sundre? Similar type of programming per se, is that sort of, because I know we've been compared to that before, how we do our FCSS funding as compared to how they do. Not that we need to be the same, I'm not saying that, but is this sort of the same type of a situation?
So halfway there, that doesn't answer your question, I know, but FCSS Sundre Greenwood Neighborhood Place, in Sundre, their council gives their entire FCSS dollars to Greenwood Neighborhood Place. They're a standalone and they are a nonprofit. So Ponoka is similarly run that way. So they get to run all their own programs. The model that we kind of looked at when we were doing this a bit was actually Sylvan Lake. Sylvan Lake is their department's quite a bit larger than ours and very robust, really going strong. But this is more, I would say, a little more like Sylvan Lake. And again, the province gives every community the ability to run what works best for their community. So we do see within our region Carstairs has an office outside the town office where people access supports, as well as Cremona does that, and Didsbury. Now, Didsbury's is kind of connected to their town office right now, but it is where the Mountain View Family Resource Network is and the FCSS. They're all right in that same, and they have a different door to enter in. But yeah, so a lot of the communities are doing this kind of blended delivery.
Thank you very much for that information. That actually does answer my question.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I am conscious of the time, and I do appreciate the information, and so along those lines, I guess I was just wondering, so do we not have the capacity here to create a meeting room here? It seemed a meeting room was one of the big drivers to going this route. Do we not have the capacity, say, to remove a wall and create a meeting room, meeting facility within this building that could sufficiently meet needs?
So I'm not allowed to break down walls myself, but that's something that we would have to discuss. I think the bigger thing here, even than meeting space, is there's going to be, we've reached out to, for example, Mountain View Emergency Shelter Society. They are possibly looking for a new office space. And we have the Mountain View Moccasin House. They're looking for a place to call home. They're looking for a permanent kind of space. We would be able to give them an office space that is just for them. Some of their new priorities are trying to reconnect people of Indigenous background with their Indigenous culture, as well as educate our community about different Indigenous, ceremonies and just the reconciliation points. And then we also have this idea of the youth center. It too, right? We can't really have a youth center in this building, but this would serve as a youth center and a place for those kids, as well as the big one is programming. Programming space seems to be a really big issue within our community. Mountain View Family Resource Network is always looking for somewhere to do their parent programs, their parent-child programs. Mountain View Moccasin House is looking for places to do their programming. We've got the newcomers to Canada. We've got a Latino group. We've got the Filipino group, and we've got the displaced Ukrainians, also looking for spaces to meet together. A few weeks back, we had Councillor Cummings brought up a group, Olds and Area Special Family Voices. This group I met with about a week and a half ago. They too are looking for space to do programming for their children who are adults that don't attend PADNOMA programming or things like that. They're looking for a place to connect. So the programming space is a big part of this as well.
Thank you.
Director Wagstaff?
And further to that, one of the things that we've identified both locally and in discussions with other FCSS models or other communities is that there is a barrier for a lot of individuals in the community of coming to town office, going to the government, as compared to going to a facility or an office space that's embedded in the community. So this model is really a delivery model that is embedded within the community, and that's the difference from where we are today as compared to what we're proposing.
All right. Councillor Walsh?
I'm just curious the size of space that you will be looking for when you're talking about this. And secondary to that, will some of these people be paying for their office space?
So we have had some discussion with some of the groups that are looking for office space. And yes, they have some budget to put towards this. The places that we've kind of been looking at to have the youth center and to have the programming space and the offices and such it's about between 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. So that would be roughly both sides of New to You, really, if you want something visual. Yeah.
Good. Any further questions? Well, thank you very much for your presentation today and all the great information that you've put forward here. It gives us lots of food for thought, and I do believe it is something that our community needs. And I will ask for the motion to be put on the floor. Mayor Dahl?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would accept for information the Community Services FCSS report. I Are you looking to bring this back to council, actually? I'm sorry. Okay, and bring back to a future regular council meeting.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Ask for who's in favor? Opposed, if any? Passed. Thank you very much. Have a great day. All right, that takes us on to reports and statistics. Item number 5, Economic Development Quarterly Report. And I'll turn it over to CAO Williams for introduction.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and already at the podium and mic, we have our EDO, Sandra Blythe, with us to walk us through this. Sandra, all yours.
Testing. You hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. It's been a while since I've seen everyone. Okay, so just to get started here, let me move down. All right. Okay, so I thought for this presentation, we'd shake it up a little bit, starting with business retention expansion. So some of the discussion that's been happening over the last month or so has been the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. So previously, we were participating in the rural entrepreneur stream of that program, which is the new businesses to the community, and there's some exciting news coming up I'll talk about later. And this is the new one, the rural renewal stream. So this is all about immigrant workers into the community. So where we're at with that is the community of Innisfail has agreed, as you know, to partner with us as they have a community partnership already set up. So that's helped streamline some things for us and allow us to fall within their partnership. So where we're at right now is trying to identify, well, what is that process? Because they have a process for meeting with their partners. So we're trying to define how that's going to work, bringing us in, as well as I believe Bowden is the other community. So those meetings are going to be happening over the next month. However, in order to move things a little bit quicker, we have put together the rural application. So I have gotten those out to, I think it's 10 businesses. So they have received the form and they're in the process of filling that out right now. So that will allow us to hit the ground running once we figure out what our process is with the community of Innisfail. With that, what else was I going to? Oh yeah, so our new website, which you're going to be able to see next week, we're going to show you the beta version of the site. We already have the page designed for this, which will allow us to automate some things as well. So when they come for information on the program, we'll be able to send them straight to the website. They'll be able to get a lot of more information, immediate resources, links to various services, and so on and so forth. Some of the other things that I've done in the meantime is meeting with Care for Newcomers organization and talking to some of the other communities about, you know, what are the other services that are out there. So they're compiling a list right now, which will allow us to sort of also help that immigrant entrepreneur, or worker, when they get here, to know who to talk to, who is the community. So just listening to Heather's presentation and understanding who our communities are, Filipino, Latino, and so forth, knowing who those communities are and being able to connect them to those. So that's going to be important, and I think having the center will be obviously a great resource for some of these new people coming into our community. All right, so this is an attraction. The Invest Old sales funnel, so we've been talking about this for quite a few months. So where we're at right now is building the top part of the sales funnel, which is awareness and creating trust within our community. So we're doing that through social media, email, and our website. So I know not everybody is on social media, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of a breakout. So over the last quarter, we've done 30 social media posts. Our platforms are LinkedIn and Facebook. And these are the areas that we've been focusing our posts on. So everything from information for the new entrepreneur, people looking for employment opportunities, marketing, which has been our local businesses. So what I can tell you right now is Facebook, those are the major posts. Those ones get the most views, the most comments, the most shares. Capital is another one. So any kinds of loan programs or grants that come available, we've been posting on those. Training, manufacturing certifications, apprenticeship opportunities, as well as workshops and events and other things. So anyways, 30 social media posts. That has been growing our social media for us. One of the key things that we're also doing and just started is, one, going out and getting the video of available lands and properties. We've done 2 land videos, and because our website's not up, we're not pumping a lot of this stuff out yet, because these are the things that we want to drive potential investors into our sales funnel. So right now, we're just sort of throwing some things out and see what the analytics are telling us. So what we will do with properties is, first we go out, we do a video promoting the area and, you know, where the heavy haul routes are and so forth. Then the second thing that we do about 3 to 4 weeks later is we do a carousel promo of that same property. It just looks a little different, but it gives the details of what's available on those lands. It's a partnership with our realtors, gives them an opportunity to be promoted again on a social media platform. This group right here, the realtors here, were very excited about this promotion. They've had a lot of views and interest. And then the third part is, once after we do the carousel promo, everything drives them back to our website. But what we do then is we will post it on our website, so when investors come, they can click and find all of this information. So again, video promos, this is the second one that we did. This one actually came out on LinkedIn as one of the top performing posts that we've put out. And the other is the agriculture industry. So we haven't done any others. I've shown this one to you already, but we have others that are in the making. Once the website's done, then we'll get them out and drive folks through the sales funnel. So as well, just to give you a bit of analytics, Quesada was the top performing post on Facebook, 5,838 impressions, engagement 1,883, and our land, which one is that? Actually, that's the Patry's land, had 1,030 impressions and reaching 917. Then if we look down to LinkedIn, the other top performer was Yummy Indian Cuisine was the other one, and the top land was the other land video. So anyways, we're just starting to build our following on these platforms. What can I tell you? Yeah, so far we've promoted, I think, 5 or 6 businesses, local businesses. So what's the criteria around that? New businesses, of course, we want to get out and help profile them. The other criteria is expansions to the business, so substantial expansions that are happening. We've had some questions about, well, they've been around for a year. So we added in, if you started the business during COVID, you're still considered a new business. So we're, getting calls about that, and a lot of interest and people happy to be marketed. Looking down below, if you look at the impressions down there, the first one on Yummy Indian Cuisine received 2,506 impressions, 331 views. Now the LinkedIn also, what we're already starting to define is that LinkedIn, there's a lot more engagement with people on the grants and the training and the land and property. Where on Facebook, they're more interested in just hearing the good news stories about local businesses. So as we move down the path, we're probably going to start defining where we're going to be putting our content and where not. All right, and on here at the top of the slide, you can see that we're doing a comparative of ourselves to Invest Grand Prairie, Invest Medicine Hat, and Calgary Economic Development. So we've got a 49% audience growth from everyone else. However, we're new and exciting, so that's why the percentage is that much higher. But we're going to continue to compare ourselves to that, as well as Invest Alberta. And fans, so as of today, we have 190 followers on Facebook, so that's growing, and as we add more content, obviously that will continue to grow. So 92% from the original 88 when we started out in December or November. In addition to that, we've also put together an electronic and print copy of the non-residential tax incentive, and we've gotten that out as well on social media. And this week, we will be doing the residential tax incentive. So what's nice about this is now that it's in electronic format, we also attach that to the real estate package, the carousel promotion when we do that. So people will automatically see, oh, there's an incentive available for this property as well. Business View magazine, we were able to secure a position to have a story done on the town of Olds with this magazine. They're an international magazine. So myself and Brent participated, as well as Springwood Developments and Olds College participated in that interview. So that, I'm hoping, is going to come out in the next few weeks. So one of the other things that we tested this quarter was our e-letter campaign. So as much as social media is one avenue for marketing, email, landing in people's inboxes are actually, the return on investment and time in that is actually better by email, as long as the information is of great value. So here, this one we did, this is the first, and we will have them by industry. So this one was tourism. You can see down below total recipients. There were 75 people that this letter went to. Looks like 5 didn't receive it for some reason, probably an old email, and 102 opened it. So that was actually quite good. And the next ones that we'll do will be manufacturing, I think agriculture and construction. So they will look a little bit different, but they will all, again, drive people back to the website for information. So this one had a little bit on a tourism survey that came out by Travel Alberta, digital adoption program, which is free program to help people get their digital affairs in order. And I can't even see what that bottom was. Oh, and grant funding, that's it. That's available. Okay, and similar slide as every other time I've presented. So we've had about 26 engagements with local businesses on these key items that they're interested in: workforce development, land and property requirements, interest in marketing, and then some were interested in regulatory issues that they needed addressing. Okay, economic development strategy and the execution of that. So once again, you've seen these images before. The economic strategy looks at 2 components, first being looking at our economic foundation, our economy, you know, what does it look like, how healthy is it, and how competitive it is. And then number 2 is analyzing the economic drivers, which are your industry clusters. So in order to move forward, based on all the other things that we have in the pipeline to work on, I'm suggesting that we move only on part number 1, which is looking at our economic foundation and working with our local businesses to do that assessment. So the proposed timeline on that is doing some resource preparation in the month of March and April, which then would move us into the phase where we would release an RFP, hire a consultant who would do the survey and compile the information and write the report for us, as well as forming the business retention expansion survey teams, some of which we've already started. And I should mention too, before I get into all of this, the BRE proposed timeline, those are the steps that would be involved in getting that large business survey out there to allow us to analyze our economy. And the survey is already been reviewed by the Economic Secretariat, so we're looking at, I think there's only 6 questions left that we have to look at. So that's the initial boo at that, but then of course it would be taking that final document, bringing it over to, you know, internally through Scott and Heather and other folks internally, as well as external agencies that are relevant to these areas. So then we'd be looking at, I'm guesstimating around October, November, we should be in a position to be able to actually conduct the survey. So over the summer, it would be a lot of marketing, letting the community know what's coming, public information sessions, why is this survey important to you as a business owner, as a community stakeholder. Probably look at doing 3 public information sessions at various times. That would be a partnership with our Chamber of Commerce as well. So perhaps integrating that in some of their things that they want to get out. Anyway, so that's what we're looking at. That's the estimated timeline for what we're looking at this year. Investment readiness, as you know, we work with the technical readiness team to identify those projects that allow us to continuously improve our investment readiness. So looking down below, we have 9 projects that are active and 7 projects to date that have been completed. Okay, business attractions. So here we're looking at 2 active leads under the construction industry worth an estimated $50 million. 1 under the agriculture sector, again, $50 million. Retail, we don't know the numbers on that yet. Manufacturing industry, $1.4 billion. And waste management remediation, a potential of $180 million. That one has gone somewhat black, so I don't know, that may not be on their next meeting. But the important one as well is the Immigrant Entrepreneur Program. So we now have officially 1 landed immigrant business. She received her papers 3 to 4 weeks ago. And as well, 1 other one who contacted me just last week, and he's almost ready to receive his papers, so he's looking at properties and everything. So I'll be meeting with both of those next week, which will be great to have that on the website to show their families and who's coming to our community. Oh, and I should also mention, so that program's slowing down quite a bit. We're down to 9 leads that have come through the pipeline, so the immigrant job program is the one really scaling up, and this one's slowing down a bit. So for a total of $1.6 billion in potential active investment leads. And then a host of various local, regional, provincial, and international or national meetings that I've had over the last quarter. And that's it.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Blitz. Any questions for Ms. Blythe? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and through you to Ms. Blythe. Thank you very much for your presentation. I had one question with regards when you were talking about the website and the new businesses you're talking about. Where do we sit with some of our long-term businesses that are in town, some of the current ones that have been around for a while? Where do they fit within the website? Would they be something that you'd be looking to add to let people know what kind of businesses are in town? Are you looking at doing a kind of a list? Or
Yeah.
what, maybe you could give me a little bit of a picture of what will happen with those?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that we're looking at we are in the process of compiling, is as we get the business licenses in, my assistant is putting them into proper industry categories, so we know, who our construction businesses are. And then breaking those into supplier lists. So they'll be able to go into the website and identify within that industry who is available. Accommodation and food, restaurants, things like that. So if a film crew, as an example, comes into town, they'll be able to quickly go in and find out, those resources that they're looking for. So yes, we are. Yeah. And then in addition to that, the larger businesses, those are the ones that we're looking at having those industry videos on, right? So who are those big companies that are exporting out of the community and out of the region, and doing a bit of a profile on that? So those driving industries are the industries we're going to be going after in some respect, right? So we really want to be able to profile that. So that's stuff that we're also working on.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and through you to Ms. Blythe. So going a little further then on Councillor Ryan's question, with our existing businesses per se, are we reaching out to them via email to get them to buy into the Investols website, to give us updated information on a regular basis, you know, promote themselves in any way, shape, or form so that they would have that extra opportunity?
Yeah, so once we formally launch the website, it's, you know, that's going to be out in public. We've been doing a little bit of promo, getting a few questions here and there, but nothing too crazy, right? But once the website's up, then that's going to be an opportunity for anybody locally that's looking to invest locally, you know, how to get a hold of us or click on information that's relevant to them to find out what does that look like. I should also mention the next part of this is working on the technical piece, so forms. So a simple form, when an investor comes on the website, we immediately have them identify what their industry is, what country are they from, what type of information are they interested in. Our ability to be able to automate that then allows us to go, oh, that individual should get an automatic information on specific industry information about our community or about our region. So there's going to be a host of different ways when people go to the website to be able to be engaged and get them in that sales funnel.
CEO Williams, comment?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just further to Councillor Blatz and even to Councillor Ryan's comments, no matter what we do with economic development, there's always going to be that new versus current debate. But to put it in context, the town of Olds is not a small town. We have 834 active business licenses in 2022. To us to provide outreach promotion to each one of those, it's just never going to be possible. And you can see in smaller towns around us that do a very great job in largely social media engagement and promoting current existing businesses. They have a much smaller economy than the town of Olds, so we have a much different approach. Right. Now, what Invest Olds is trying to do, one of the things it's trying to do is provide a mechanism for existing businesses to promote themselves, to try to be a one-stop shop. But really, how I see this working in the future, and it comes down to buy-in, both with the Chamber of Commerce and Uptown Olds, that through our ED strategy, which is about to kick off in the next month or two, trying to incentivize them to participate, that this is a way, it won't happen immediately, but to promote your own business, to promote the economy, and that whole concept of rising tide lifts all boats. We have to promote existing, we have to focus on our existing and current economy, but we also have to attract new businesses here too. Like we're in an excellent location. We have great amenities both with third-party partners such as Olds College and the manufacturing facilities, and we have great local amenities, whether it be sports fields, recreation complexes, libraries, etc. So that holistic approach that even though we're never going to make everyone happy, that someone who's not getting attention for something's always going to feel left out to some extent, it doesn't mean that the approach is wrong. It's just we have to make them buy into the approach, become partners in the approach, and that would make ourselves, the town, local businesses much healthier.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if I can add to that, just this morning we talked about the Chamber does a lot of promotion on existing businesses. Oh, you know, this business has been here for 20 years, and we were talking about how we should reshare some of that, right? So it's becoming, okay, so Invest Olds is going to focus here. This is their criteria. The Chamber's this. But it's, as long as we're sort of sharing in that information and supporting one another, resharing each of our content, then we're both doing a great job, right? It's when you have an overlap, if we're all doing the same thing, well, that's not effective. But if you're going to focus here and we can focus there, then it works. And let's reshare our content.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thanks, Sandra, for the presentation. I guess I just have, again, a couple short snap questions that I'll hopefully get a chance to ask. One is, can you help me understand what the behind the scenes looks like for things like the Invest Old websites and everything? And our social media posting, like you referenced, you have an assistant. I'm not sure if that's the CAO or somebody else within the organization. So who's doing this work? Do we have a consultant? Do we have a contractor? I will say I'm a little discouraged at where we're at with some of these initiatives, because it was like about a year ago, during Small Business Week, we launched the Invest Olds website. The CAO referenced we have over 800 business, or business licenses. So I look at some of the statistics and things like 30 social media posts in a quarter. I'm willing to grant a little bit of latitude to say, yeah, we're learning to crawl before we walk and everything else, but it seems slow. And I know it takes 3 years or more to get an economic development strategy going, but can you help me understand just kind of how and where we're building this? You referenced relative to the chamber and cross posts and sharing and everything, which to me are fantastic ideas. But do we see that happening?
So what we've been doing is the digital marketing person was hired in, I believe it was October. And so then it was a couple of months of identifying what are those social media things, what's the plan for communications and how does that look, as well as designing a website from scratch, right? So those things take time, building that a website in the back end with the necessary automations and things like that, and you're going to see that on Monday. But part of his job was not just designing a website, it was also developing social media content, getting out, doing those interviews, creating the blog. So he's been doing all that in the back end, and some of that stuff you're not going to see till we have the website up, because we want people to be going through the website into the sales funnel. That's where all the really good analytics comes from. So those things take time. From a social media perspective, when you come out posting every day, I'm not someone that thinks that you should necessarily have posts every day, because then people, it's Invest Olds again, right? We want to make sure that our content is valuable, of use to who our market is that we're marketing to, and we've already defined some of those things, which I've talked about, right? It's like the training, grants, Facebook, they're not too interested in that, right? It's when we post those things on LinkedIn, okay, that's where those posts are more interested. Land and property, same thing, it's LinkedIn, it's not Facebook. Facebook wants to see the local businesses. So the analytics around social media and communications and marketing is an evolving thing. You don't really know till you get stuff out there to see who your audience is, who's clicking on us. The reality is, once we get the website up, we also want to look at starting to invest in advertising. So our ads on land and property or agriculture industry are landing on pages that are of interest to the agriculture industry. So it's less of an organic approach and more of a pointed approach. But right now, without a website, we're testing some things, right? And seeing who that audience is. And if you actually look at the pages, you can start to see it outlines for you on LinkedIn. 39 of those are presidents, 37 are project managers, economic developers, there's 19 of those in there. So you start to see a profile of who your followers are. Eventually, once we do advertising in LinkedIn, we can actually break that information out by industry. So I want to start seeing finance, people interested in finance or working in finance. What are the size of the companies that are clicking on our information? What countries are clicking on us? And actually, I didn't have that slide in here. We already had other countries from India are hitting us. And I took a picture of it too, and I don't have my phone here. But you will see that in the next quarterly report, what countries are clicking on our website. And when you've only got, I think we're at 249 followers on LinkedIn, we've already beat the towns following as well. That's pretty good when these other countries are already clicking on our information. Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that the people on my LinkedIn, so when I reshare, the people that are in my following are agriculture, oil and gas. Like, I've got a lot of economic development type business development people on my LinkedIn right now. Well, now I'm going out and I'm hitting agriculture people. Anybody ag-related, anybody construction-related. That's who I want on my personal LinkedIn, so when I reshare, they're seeing it. And that's the other thing. If you guys are on social media, please follow us.
Comment, CEO Williams?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just to add to that, and to more directly to Councillor Wilson's question, comments, economic development is not an overnight success, as you alluded to, but also coming back to the day-to-day work. Then I'll get to the budget question you asked as well, or staffing question. The active leads, that was one of the slides near the end of the presentation, or leads presented. I know this because I'm with Sandra in many of these meetings, not all of them. We do meet with investors and recurring meetings with the same investors on a regular basis. Council has been aware of some of them. Some of them are still in the pipeline, but the main focus to date has been industrial, mainly focused around the value ag industry, high-density residential, some of the stagnant ASPs that surround Olds, and then with the escaping me right now, the commercial side of things. So what you see the west side of town right now, Loblaw's property, and the properties to the west of Canadian Tire, the Cornerstone development. So all of that takes time, resources, and Sandra's essentially a one-person show. Now, if you recall in 2022 budget, I hope you do because I was not here, council funded a digital media strategy, which is essentially building what you're seeing a lot in front of you, Invest Olds' footprint. It also funded a business development coordinator, which is still funded in the budget. I did make reference to council in my early months here, if you recall, that I was not yet comfortable hiring that position until we had the strategy more focused, more in place. So I've been using a portion of those dollars to fund a part-time administrative support, who works virtually for Sandra. So it is still a fraction of that budget. It's not totally been expended, but it's just on a contract basis, no employer obligations outside of wages. So that is helping us kind of get over this hump of what does ED do and how do we do it? Well, unfortunately, it takes a lot of setup and legwork and a lot of questions, which council is very much permitted and encouraged to question on the timelines and the timeliness of economic development efforts. But it is a process, and ED, even though Sandra is our EDO, it is very much my process. I am in charge of it on the behalf of council. So I have faith that it is going in the right direction, and I encourage council to stick with it.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Daley, and thank you again to Sandra and both Brent. You answered my questions in regard to our existing business. It is very important that we still recognize, even though I realize that we've got over 800 businesses in town, but just so that they have the opportunity and are aware that they can also participate in this process and promote their own business from within this, as well as partnering with either Uptown Olds, depending on their location, or with the Olds Chamber of Commerce. And that might be a good mechanism for both of those committees to grow and thrive as well within our whole economic development picture, if you want to use it per se, so that everybody has equal playing field, I guess.
Thank you. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you. I'd just like to thank CEO Williams for sharing the information he just shared, because I have had mayors ask me if they could know what you're doing, because they want to, I don't know how to say it, copycat what you're doing or learn what you've done in this program. So there's the interest out there. They're watching it and they're waiting to see, because they believe it's effective. And I just said to contact Brent, our CAO, so they're watching. We do have people watching what you're doing in economic development with this program.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Darley. I have a question with regards to the immigration. I appreciate getting that info, and I just wanted to find out if we could go to that slide where you had the list of businesses that you're still following on through, and where you had the 9 projects. We could just go to that.
This one?
No, I think it was with, there was an orange. There you go.
This one.
So this one here, I just had a quick question, just to clear in my mind where these are coming from. Is that from that program that we were involved in and you were involved in last spring with regards to James Carpenter and all of that? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So that was, that's been quite a, a healthy amount of information that you've gotten through that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and with that as well, with the immigrant entrepreneur, I was told through a person that we work through the government with regionally, we may have been the first community to have multiple community letters go forward to the province for approval. So I have an email into the minister's office to find out if she is the first landed immigrant entrepreneur. So if she is, then we definitely want to celebrate that with the government. So fingers crossed, we'll see.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thanks for the comments clarifying from the CAO the ED side of things. And I am aware, as I alluded to, that we've got to plant seeds and it takes a while for those seeds to bear fruit. And my challenge is, because I have a brief comment and then I have a question, my challenge is I tend to be an impatient person, so I need to balance that with the process itself. We have been teased for a while with the notion of clusters and information, so I am continually on the edge of my seat waiting for that next step around the clusters and what that looks like and what it's going to mean as far as an ED strategy. So I continue to wait for that. My question is, and it kind of ties in with Mayor Dahl's comment, just wondering if you could share, Sandra, what collaboration, what connection takes place with CAPE? We're a member of CAPE. We pay an annual fee to CAPE. The Mayor has referenced that there are many other people, including myself, on the edge of our seat, looking and waiting for the ED strategy to proceed and progress. How do we share information within CAPE? And probably more important, how do we steal wise practices from other members of CAPE? What does that look like?
So the regional economic developers meet somewhat regularly. Since I've been here, it's been about every 3 to 4 months. People get together, we talk about programs like the AIP, how that's working in each other's communities, CAPE. I believe their economic strategy just came out. It's, I think, 4 goals or something were highlighted, one of which is investment, attraction, and readiness. So, I mean, when we get together with CAPE, it's, they give us surveys, ask us questions about certain things, we provide answers to those, and I'm assuming that is what drives their economic strategy. It's largely more liaison type things, like working together and saying, oh, this is where you get this information, oh, that'd be valuable to me. And CAPE is trying to develop a branding strategy. That's their next step, to brand the region and get that out there from central Alberta. But yeah, it's more of a collaboration, engagement. There's agenda items that we talk about when we get together. They don't drive our strategy, though. They provide support, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does, and thank you for that. But, and again, to me, though, it's an opportunity for sharing. And so the mayor's comments relative to people want to know and are waiting to see what happens here, there is a vehicle to certainly share that information and to borrow with pride from other municipalities as to what they're doing, so.
Absolutely, yep.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, through you to Ms. Blythe. So just to go a little further with what Councillor Wilson was saying, I noticed in our package today, we do talk about the budget, the provincial budget, and the increased funding to readers, which is what CAPE is. Does that help, do you see anywhere that will help us in the future, or, you know, any kind of, are you getting any kind of information from them with regards to where they're going to spend the additional funding?
So, for what we're doing, that region is way too big, right, for us, right? So, in this economic strategy, it's more about really the Mountain View County region. Innisfail, though not part of Mountain View County, should be part of this strategy. So when we talk about industry clusters, it's looking at those ag people that are right in our 1-hour commuter shed. Those are the ones we should be working with. Cape has a mandate to look at a much broader region. So their ability to be able to provide detailed information to us on anything, I came, I said, what do you have for workforce development? What do you have for industry information and investment attraction? It's on the broader region. We need something much smaller to be effective, right? So that's why I say it's more of a collaboration, discussion, share information here and there. But yeah, their scope is much broader than what we want to be.
Mayor Dahl?
Thank you. To Councillor Wilson's comment, when I was stating people want to know, what they want to know is the question of Invest Olds, how they could have that in their system is what they're looking for. I think the comment for the information is just that they like looking at it because they're fascinated by the Invest Olds is what they want to initiate.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Ms. Blythe, I do have a question, a couple of them. Not quite snappers like Councillor Wilson, but so when we're recruiting and trying to attract new Canadians to our community, do we have a plan in place for support for those new citizens to Canada? Just from my previous experience, I do recognize that somebody coming from a different environment coming to Alberta, it can be a bit of a culture shock as well as an environmental shock. So do we have anything in place in our community as far as volunteers or counseling or whatever may be needed for that
Yeah.
particular person?
Yeah, so that's part of the challenge, right? Immigration services is a big thing. And it sounds like we have it sort of in different fractions. So the Care for Newcomers organization, which is funded, I believe, federally and provincially, that's kind of what they do. They're out of Red Deer. So, but she is aware of different people locally that can assist with language barriers, or people in other communities, be it Red Deer or Calgary, that can lend assistance in other services, okay? So for us, though, as a community, it's about building a community for those immigrants, right? So imagine yourself going to another country and you're with people that don't speak your language and all of those things. It's very hard to feel a part of a community. So we have to create that community for them. That's costly. So seeing Heather bringing up the center, well, that makes good sense to me. Now we can maybe start to look at what are those programs that we could bring to attract more Filipinos. But even understanding who are the immigrants in our community, there's no stats on that. So I don't even know who's landed in the last year. So yes, it takes a building, right, of how do we make them feel welcome? Because retention's the key. You can get them here, but it's retention.
Well, and I just think of somebody, a few years back, we had a visitor to the college from Jamaica, and he had never seen snow before in his life, and I could well imagine if we got a new Canadian shows up here in December, it might be a bit of a
Yeah.
environmental shock to him, so. Any further questions from council? I have one more, if you so choose to entertain, and that is, when you have the future or potential investors coming to the community of Olds, how are you finding, or is there anything that we need to do to change as far as the red tape with the business of the town of Olds, to make it more incentive for them to be here?
Right, and so that's part of the investment readiness team, the technical readiness team, is ourselves identifying that, as well as talking to builders, developers, and others. What are we doing wrong? But what I can tell you is the investors that are in the pipeline, one in particular, I'm hoping, we're going to have them by the end of the month, said to me, we picked your community because of the level of detail that you provided in the expression of interest, and because you have a team. We can come in and you're handling all that for us right away. They come to me with the questions. Sandra, we need to know about the water line. How much pressure is in that water line? I'll get it for you. Sandra, we need to know what are the easements around that potential road that's going to be up there at that property that we're looking at. I'll get that for you. They can get back to business as long as we can provide that service. Last week, I had a construction company from Red Deer wanting to meet with me that read an article of the last report I gave on Invest Olds, did some research, and he said, I love that. Nobody else is doing that. Where did you guys come up with that? And that's why we had lunch. He's like, I want to do business in Olds. What do I need to do? So it's not rocket science, but it's just different. And it's focused on industry and business and helping them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. If there's no other questions, I'll make a motion if you. I move to accept for information the presentation provided by our Economic Development Officer. Just as information, presented as information. I don't think you need to bring anything back.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ryan. Mayor Dahl?
Just like that, add a question. Was the CAO in the recommendation looking for this to come back to council? Good, perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Very informative. Again, look forward to a lot of new things coming down the pipe. And I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? And it's passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Blythe. That takes us to item number 6 on our agenda, bylaws and policy review. Turn it over to CAO Williams for introductions.
Thank you once again, Deputy Mayor. So this is something Council has seen relatively recently, so I'm going to lead the introduction, and Director Andrew is here for the specifics. So questions on that may be directed to him. So this came forward at February's PMP to Council, and there was a direction to strike an ad hoc committee to examine the community standards bylaw that was presented that day. What you have before you, apart from this cover page that is on your screen, is the same bylaw, and I want to explain a bit why that is. So following February's PMP, we met internally and figured out the logistics of the ad hoc committee and what we asked to council and what was directed. And I wanted to take a second stab at explaining the intention behind the February's presentation. So the CSB bylaw before you and before council in February was a consolidation of the existing 7 bylaws that represent our community standards framework. Those bylaws had not been changed outside of 3, what I would say, relatively minor changes. Everything else was just consolidated, more for ease of access, ease of review, and then future reference by the public, as opposed to having 7 different documents. So those 3 changes are listed with a brief description: e-scooters, 72-hour parking, and universal fine schedule, which I believe are minor. The fine schedule, of course, is a bit of a change. It's more of a correcting, I would say, an error or several errors within our various frameworks. But the process that I envisioned this taking is that council would move to consolidate the existing 7 bylaws with the 3 minor changes, or not. Consolidation was kind of the main piece. And then during service level review, which again will occur in the early part of the spring, administration would then bring to council the specific service levels that this CSB bylaw directs administration to undertake. And then with capacity issues in our municipal enforcement function, which I have made council aware of not too long ago, we would have discussion on what reducing those service levels could look like versus, say, adding capacity to our ME function. So the issue with what we're finding is that these bylaws are essentially, outside of the 3 changes, already reviewed by council and legal. So the efficacy of reviewing 7 bylaws, again, that have already been passed by council, doesn't seem like a great use of time. And you're welcome to disagree. And these bylaws are largely effective, save for a few things. What's not effective, I would argue, is the level of service that we can't meet right now. And after discussion with legal, is that the service level doesn't necessarily have to be met if council decides that there's, for example, a temporary suspension to the service level. So let's take sidewalks, for instance. The town must clear its town-owned sidewalks within 48 hours or we face legal liability. That will never change. For instance, Highway 27, we take responsibility for. Any sidewalks around a park or sports field, that's our responsibility. However, residential sidewalks in front of private residences, those still have a 48-hour rule, but the liability to the town is negligible. In fact, the property owner assumes that liability. So even though we say that we're going to enforce this 48-hour rule, having our peace officers, of which there are 2 of them, patrol neighborhoods looking for it is just not enough time in the day, so to speak, when you have, obviously, 120-something kilometers of roads. So that is something I will bring to council to ask for a temporary reduction in that service level or just a change of that service level, should council wish, at the service level review. So going forward for today, the ask is that council receive this for information and direct administration to bring it to a future council meeting. And that would forego the recommendation made at February's PMP. But, of course, it is an ask of council, and council may direct as it wishes, but happy to take any questions on that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and also thank you to our CAO, because as I stated in our meeting, our last meeting, that I believe this document should be, if we have many changes that need to be made, be discussed in a fully open and transparent council meeting. And I concur with the fact that I don't believe that we need to form a separate ad hoc committee, because we don't have the budget dollars at this point in time to sit and dissect this. I mean, I have a number of questions, but if we're going to review it at a service level, then I think at that point in time, I will refrain from asking a lot of my questions until then, because they may be answered during that discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daley, and through you to CEO Williams. Thank you very much for clarifying what we're looking at for this, because it was a little bit hazy, I think, last time. I concur with Councillor Blatz. It definitely needs to be spoken to and discussed in public. So I'm happy with not having this ad hoc committee. But also, I do note that I do have at least, I think, 8 or 9 items within this document that, that I find that are just not feasible for enforcement, for one thing. But one of them actually contradicts another bylaw. So I don't know how you would want to, I mean, that's not a service level. That's, if it contradicts, and pass that information on to you or to whoever's handling with the bylaw itself. But I don't know how you would like to handle the questions that I have if they're not service level related.
CAO Wilson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, and good question. Actually, I misspoke a bit on the recommendation, which is now on the screen, that administration is recommending this be brought forward for first reading. So when council has time to review the consolidation of the existing bylaws, I would encourage you to send your questions, comments, corrections in advance, and we could list what those then are in the amended bylaw, whether we agree or not. We could certainly leave that, but there's definitely some mistakes, smaller, and in case of the contradiction, a bit larger. And the idea for first reading is that even though it's a consolidation with only 3 largely immaterial changes being proposed, that is in a way a more transparent to provide some avenue for public engagement. Should we seek to get it at this point? And you're right, when it comes then to service level, the strategy is not there yet, but certainly we do want to make sure that people not just understand what's being proposed to change, but have an opportunity to speak to what's being proposed to either increase or decrease in terms of service levels. But yeah, you're right. First reading is being proposed right now to be brought forward at the next council meeting, and then we can talk about those mechanic changes.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and a comment and kind of a question. So I like what Councillor Ryan has asked and the response that we've had from our CEO, but I would just ask that all of council is CC'd on any changes so that we're kind of all aware of what's coming forward, please. And my next question is, in this consolidation, at some point in time, are we going to be removing certain parts of it, such as taking out animal control and making it a separate bylaw, or are we going to leave them all together? And I don't know if that would be either CAO Williams or to Director Andrew.
Thank you.
I'd probably pass this to Director Andrew.
Okay. Director Andrew, please.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, the intent is absolutely to break it apart. And so the first step was the consolidation takes 7 previous bylaws and makes it into one, which is a bit of a red tape reduction. So it takes a 52-page document and it narrows it down to approximately 30, I believe, is just by consolidating alone makes it that much easier to navigate. The second step, which is through open public consultation, as council is directed, to engage the public and to look at what is contained within the CSB as we break it apart. So one example would be traffic enforcement would become its own entity, and you're only looking at maybe 8 to 10 pages of length for the traffic section, which would then become its own document. Animal control would be, again, another document of another dozen pages. So it makes it even smaller and easier for the public to navigate through our website and through enforcement, and it's less cumbersome because when you have individual pieces of legislation or bylaw in place, some things don't need to be revised. The traffic and enforcement section rarely would change. They're generic in nature for most municipalities and don't require future updates. I mean, minimal maintenance per se. Animal control, again, when we've dealt with things like urban hens in the past, barring the next, whatever desire in the community to, expand or to look at how things are done differently, it would probably not require a whole lot. The people portion of the CSB, which is kind of the rules and regulations of the community, those things are a little more dynamic and obviously change based on community needs. So it makes it certainly easier for council and the public in the future when you have 3 separate documents.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. Through you to Director Andrew then. Director, do you think then at that time when you pull something out, say animal control, would that be best to have questions raised with regards to enforcement at that time then?
I don't believe so. I think the process that was outlined by CAO Williams, I think works for us because obviously we want to work on these concurrently. Our goal is to provide you with the best working version that we can at a start. We've already done extensive research about other communities and practices in place currently in other similar situations, and then obviously it's for you to debate and to change as you see fit. So I would like the information sooner rather than later, because we may have minimal changes that need to be made, because maybe what we've already researched will answer a lot of the questions that you might have.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and it will please council that I do not have any short snapper questions. I just have a very brief comment to make. And as I was in the deputy chair at that February 6th meeting, I did a fair bit of navel gazing and reflection. And as I said before, I'm a proponent of being quick, nimble, and agile. And at the end of the day, I support the course of action that's being proposed here. I'm prepared to make the motion once debate and discussion has been finalized to bring this back to a council meeting for first reading. To me, it's consistent with what I believe we should be, which is quick, nimble, and agile, and kind of was short of that back on a month ago at the PNP meeting, so.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further comments or questions? Then I turn the floor back over to Councillor Wilson to make the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd make the motion that council recommend the Consolidated Community Standards bylaw be brought to a regular meeting for first reading.
Thank you very much for that. All in favor? Opposed, if any? None. Unanimous. With that, it takes us on to item number 7, new business. And at this time, I'd like to call a 5-minute recess for everybody to get up, stretch their legs, have a drink, and we'll reconvene at 2:50. to CAO Williams for the 7A item, or organizational review action recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So similar to the CSB discussion we just had, the recommendation on this item is that council recommend that the action plan be brought forward as presented or as amended based on the discussion goes to a future council meeting. This is based on a similar model spreadsheet that you've seen before in terms of long-term tracking. It was just revised a bit to provide administration's recommendation on acceptance, partial acceptance, or declining of the 78 recommendations, along with a high-level estimate of implementation timelines, which will be more specific at a later date. The intention is just to get initial council direction on the recommendations, and if there are any opposition to administration's opinions. Of the 78 recommendations, 66 are recommended for acceptance, 5 to be partially accepted, and 7 to be declined. But I shall stop talking there and happy to take questions for comments or clarification.
Open the floor for comments. Councillor Walsh and then Councillor Blatz.
Yeah, just a few concerns. Personal opinion about this organizational review didn't meet my expectations of what I would thought an organizational review should have been. It's competent, but no outside the box thinking, no innovative thought behind it. So in that regard, I'm a little disappointed. But having said that, moving forward, I think these recommendations to council should be severed from the organizational review that the CAO is responsible for. I don't necessarily agree with some of these, and I'm not willing to accept them, especially the ones around the evaluation of CAO. I don't know how that made it into an organizational review, but I think that needs to be debated by council, because having gone through the CAMA website when it first came out, I go, okay, these processes are pretty similar to what we've done in the past. Now that they've changed it, I'm going, I'm not ready to go down that route. So I think we need to be, our current policies maybe adapted a little bit, changed a little bit, but they actually work, and it has worked. I've got 15 of them under my belt, and I have no issues with what they seem to bring as an issue, and they're just mirroring the CAMA website. And I'm going, that's tying our preferences to evaluation to a third-party website doesn't, in my mind, it kind of starts tying your hands over time. So those are the types of things I think we need to bring back. Council needs to debate those that as a part of the organizational review. Yeah, I agree with some of the stuff, especially around our strategic planning and that. We need to make some changes. But yeah, this is, like I say, it's pretty high level. It's accepting recommendations. It's not actually an action plan as such, but it gives us direction where to go in the future. But I would hope it would come back so that council can deal with what's being recommended to council, and that the organization through the CAO can deal with what he needs to deal with through those recommendations. But yeah, I have some concerns about accepting some of these recommendations to council without some further research by council. That is one of the things the MGA says we must do. So I think council itself needs to sit down and discuss those recommendations. But other than that, except for the disappointment, like the quality of I've gone through it 7 times, and every time I go through it, I keep asking questions. What they heard, their analysis, and what they recommend, sometimes they're just not even linked. So I'm just concerned that we should be prioritizing these into a smaller group instead of having 70-odd things to deal with. That seems daunting to me for an organization to take on all of them, even though some of them were in process already. Just some thoughts around this organizational review.
Comments? CEO Williams?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want, Councillor Arch brings up a good point on the idea of acceptance. Maybe I should just clarify. So, in using the CAO policy, the CAO evaluation policy, whatever number that is. So even though council's accepting it, obviously you will still see an amended policy come forward for a debate, and whether that's kept the same or amended slightly, specifically mentioning CAMA or not, that's a conversation for a later day. How I see these acceptance recommendations coming forward is essentially directing administration to do that. A lot of these are in my purview anyways, but council accepting it more or less states that you understand and agree with the direction, even though you won't have a direct decision to make in probably the majority of these, especially when HR is involved. To Council Wass's second point around the quality of the organizational review, this is the first one I've ever gone through, so I don't have a lot to compare by, but I wasn't involved in the mechanics of it either, so I'll reserve judgment there, but obviously happy to hear feedback too, so.
Thank you. I think we're Councillor Blatz and then Mayor Dahl.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and I had a couple of questions, but noting that we have an implementation timeline, I assume that we would probably review this maybe semi-annually to see where we are with some of these recommendations, because there's a tremendous amount of recommendations, and being that this is my first as a town councillor, I felt that it was a fairly in-depth review for the amount of budget dollars we allocated to this. We could have gone a lot more forensic with a lot more dollars, I assume. But I thought overall it captured a lot of the points that I thought needed to be made within the organization, just having conversations in past. So that was actually my question then, is really this will come back to us on a quarterly basis, semi-annual basis as to where we are with timelines, what the progress is. And I agree, council's not going to be involved in a lot of these decisions. They will be the CAO or within the staff itself, so.
CEO Williams?
That is the intention, that depending on what council accepts, declines, that it will be brought back on a regular basis just for information updates, more or less. And the recommendations council is involved in the next step. Obviously, you will have direct involvement as those items come up, policy review, service level changes. And one point you mentioned too, so if council recalls, again, we weren't involved in the RFP process, obviously, but the firm that was chosen was, I believe, let's call it third cheapest out of perhaps 8 who submitted. Then there was a scope adjustment midway through, which probably bumped them up to actually probably only 4th out of 8. Some firms were proposing a much more in-depth look. From an accounting firm, for instance, was much larger scope, but my understanding of what council's intentions were and the matching budget allocation, it kind of did lead that conversation. And even at the org review proponents' own admission that the service level piece was not as holistic as they thought it would be, just because we didn't have any service levels necessarily. So that's why a lot of the recommendations focus on creating these service levels, and there ought to be some background support further to that. And then what's not included in here is obviously those conversations that the org review consultants had directly with myself around recommendations that can't be made public, essentially. Personnel, for instance, is one of them. So, but yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you, Chair. Well, in hearing CEO Williams' comments and Councillor Walsh's comments, this is very much a living document. As you can see already, there's been several that have been declined just because of the way we change in our organization anyways. For example, FCSS, New to You. I mean, a lot of these that have been declined are things are working within our organization anyways. I tend to feel this is a guiding document so that we could do exactly what was just explained to us, bring these back to us as they're needed.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Daley. I guess, a question off to CEO Williams with regards to the one policy that Councillor Walsh talked about. Would not all of these ones that are under the council preview at the top, the 1 to 13, the policies that are in here, once these policies come to us, we can debate whether or not to accept the information that's provided by the org review anyway, so wouldn't we not just, so those 5 really are, I think there's 5 of them here that involved policies of council. Would we not have that conversation at that time? That would be my thinking. And the other areas that are underneath those that are not policy reviewed, I'm pretty much happy with how it's going forward. And I think at some point we would want to talk about number 13, and that's certainly something when the organization, when we do our own council work, whether or not we want to appoint somebody to that. But, I'm thinking that these policies will be discussed once those policies come to us.
Thank you.
That's correct, yeah. You'll get the chance to debate each one of them individually as they come up.
Exactly, so I'm fine with it.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just have a brief comment or two. One is, I do see value in this org review. To me, anytime you have what I'll call cold eyes, external eyes, taking a look at an organization, there is value to that in my mind. Even to the extent that, they could or may be influenced, the folks, they being the folks that did the org's study and review, influenced obviously through the interview process or as they're chatting with folks. I think there is value. I think it was extremely valuable to share with the public, which has been done on our website, to give them an overview of the challenges, the opportunities that face the town organizationally, and as we go and try and implement our strategy and strategic goals and everything. My one comment is I was somewhat disappointed or felt the document didn't deliver in terms of those measurables, deliverables, metrics, or whatever. After we did the amendment to the budget, I guess I had higher hopes and expectations around what would be coming back around, call it whatever you want, service levels, or how do we assess and measure performance. To me, even after the amendment, felt a little, or they've fallen a little bit short in meeting my expectations, but I think overall, I'm good with the doc. I'm good with the accept rejects, the partial rejects, or the partial accepts, and recognizing that, yeah, this is going to evolve over a considerable amount of time, given capacity constraints and everything else.
Thank you. And I noticed you refrain from using the term KPIs. Thank you. Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Dan. Now I understand that accept doesn't mean we accept in full what they have been recommending, that we get to decide. I'm comfortable with that. That's not the issue. It's just the way I read this. And to a somewhat degree, I am agreeing with Councillor Wilson. The detail just wasn't there that I expected, especially with, I'll call it KPIs. And they seem to opt for quantity instead of quality, and that is how I read it. And I've read not a lot of these type of reports, but enough to know that it could have been better. That's all I'm saying.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. And just one final kind of question I have for CAO Williams. Recommendation 61 and 62, where it says the current GIS system is not suitable. Are we updating that GIS system, and will that be something that maybe comes back as a business case study for us at budget time? Wouldn't we want to ensure that we eventually get our GIS system up to where it would be compatible to work with these recommendations?
C.O. Williams?
Good question. Yes, the short answer, we definitely want to have a more robust GIS system. And the one we have right now is certainly nothing to stick your nose up at. It's just a regional system run by Old Man River Planning Services based in Lethbridge. And it's largely, if you look on the website, I believe we're by far the largest community that utilizes it. Brooks might be on there, but to a much lower extent. For 61 and 62 recommendations specifically, the reason why it's not suitable for integration is that we don't operate our GIS system. We have to send edits, additions, corrections to Lethbridge, and there's one man operating it there. Whereas large municipalities, most counties specifically, they have both internal systems and internal people running it, where you have your real-time updates. It does relate to asset management to a large degree as well. The standalone GIS system is probably about $75,000 a year in licensing fees, and right now I think we're only paying $50,000, I believe. But hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, council will see a business case, and I'm not sure if a staff member will come along with that, but some of the contractors that provide the GIS services have a much simpler system to use that can be utilized via training of existing staff. But it's something we're not yet discussing, but on the radar.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and that's a somewhat supplementary then. So is there any way, knowing that we do go through the Old Man River system, is there any way that we could eventually adapt a regional approach? Perhaps maybe with the county or with the other municipalities within our within our county, to maybe share costs and have everybody else on a more regional system than, per se, Southern Alberta system?
It's possible, I would say. The county, maybe not so much, just because their infrastructure is so much different, and GIS basically is a visual representation of infrastructure. Also integrated with GIS, and the counties would be much more utilizing GPS tracking as well for their vehicles, their graders and their snowplows, and they mix that into their KPI. So how often is this road get graded, and was it graded? And the spray truck went by my farm and sprayed my tomatoes, and you can check, if that actually happened the day and time. So I would say potential with the other urban neighbors that we have. I would assume the town of Old would have to be the leader of such an initiative, just because of our size, but it is possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I look for a motion to be placed on the floor. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I move that we recommend the action plan be brought forward to a future council meeting as presented.
Thank you. Any further discussions or questions? All in favor? Passed unanimous. Thank you. Move on to item 7B, discussion annual RCMP priorities. Again, I'll turn it over to CAO Williams for our description.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So again, with February PMP, Staff Sergeant Wright was here, and part of the annual RCMP contract is the municipal policing priorities. The 2023-2024 priorities are being proposed to mimic the previous years at crime reduction, engagement and visibility, and mental health and domestic violence. And Staff Sergeant Wright is recommending a fourth, and that be traffic enforcement prevention education. So the recommendation is that these 4 priorities be passed for information, and that would be forwarded to Staff Sergeant Wright for inclusion in his annual report.
Thank you, CAO. Mayor Dahl?
I didn't see any other hand up, so I was going to place a motion on the floor, but I certainly see Heather.
You can proceed with the motion. We can do question and
Okay.
discussion afterwards as well.
And I'm glad that he spoke quite often to council with regards to the traffic enforcement prevention education, so I'm glad that he did ask council if we wanted to add that to the priority. And I would be happy then to recommend that, well, I guess recommend myself. Wonder if I could do that. Because I do have to sign it. I better let somebody else make this motion.
Okay, thank you.
Including number 4.
Councillor Ryan.
Well, thank you. That's a hard act to follow. Deputy Mayor Daley, before we get to a motion, I just have a comment to make with regards to this, and maybe it's a comment/question. The 4th priority, the traffic enforcement, I totally agree. Traffic enforcement should be maybe even the number 1 priority based on some of the comments we received from our residents when was that, summertime, fall? With regards to traffic and their concerns. And I'm not sure what the prevention education is. I think I would just rather say traffic enforcement, period. I'd like to see them taking on a more firm role in that regard. I know that they probably wouldn't like to do that, but I do think that that's a priority for our residents. And I would like to, I don't know if this is the numbers are in order of priority, whether or not, is number 1 crime reduction, or is it just a list of 1 to 4? I'm not sure. But I would like to see traffic enforcement be one of the number 1 or number 2 on the list, if that's an order of priority.
Thank you. CO Williams?
Yeah, no, I don't believe they're in order of priority. It's just listed as blanket priorities.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. Then I would like to see it to say traffic enforcement, because I'm not sure what they mean by prevention and education. I think a traffic enforcement period within the community.
Councillor Walsh?
I think they're 2 totally different things when you start talking about enforcement prevention. I'd much rather see people from speeding than enforcing people from speeding by stopping them. But I would rather go with traffic enforcement prevention education. If that works, then that reduces the issues that the residents have. But just plain enforcement, that's just saying people aren't going to listen. And I think we give the RCMP a chance to prove that they can do this.
Thank you. Mayor Dahl?
It does, in my way of thinking, it does change the intention. When Staff Sergeant Wright was here, I do recall the comment that he brought up was the intention for the policing to educate more first, and if that wasn't working, then they would move differently. I don't know the exact words he said out of his mind, but it does change the intention just to put traffic enforcement, in my opinion.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think it was more of an awareness to people and our citizens to, Councillor Ryan?
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and I see what they're saying. I'm just not clear as to what they would do to educate our public as to how to, drive better. Like you have a driver's license, you're responsible for the speed that you're going, you're responsible to stop at a stop sign. I mean, I'm not sure whereabouts we stop and go on this particular item with regards to prevention, and I don't know what he has in mind with that. So that's why I just said traffic enforcement, whether or not it's, they're going to be doing check stops, or whether they have a radar, or whether I don't know what they're going to do. To me, it's very vague as to the type of education they're going to do. I mean, it could be, having a class for all I know. I have no idea. I'm just saying traffic enforcement, and they can do what they need to do with regards to whether it's prevention or education or enforcement. I mean, if you stop the same person 2 or 3 times, or how many times you're going to give them before you pass out of that prevention education and go in and actually give them a ticket? I don't know. But, I'm fine with it. It's just, as long as it's on the list, I just don't know what this prevention education is going to look like. And it's kind of vague to me.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley, and I was just going to state that I believe that we get a quarterly report from Staff Sergeant Wright. So at that point in time, we could definitely be asking those types of questions and get more clarity on it, on what the description is. But traffic enforcement itself, I mean, we know that they're going to probably be doing that, but perhaps it's through their community officer that they're going to be doing some type of education, maybe with the younger drivers, that type of thing, to make them more aware, and, around school buses and those types of situations. That could be part of what it is, but I think until we actually get his quarterly report, if this is the recommendations coming forward, I think we go with these 4 recommendations and direct Mayor Dahl to write the letter and forward and include it in correspondence at the next council meeting, so we are aware of the letter, and go from there.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and again, I'm certainly not in a position to speak on behalf of the RCMP or the CPOs and so on, but maybe I can offer some possibilities to help Councillor Ryan in the area of what education prevention means. I know there is the rollover simulator, so I would envision perhaps, as they've done in the past, taking that to the high school and demonstrating the effects of what speed, alcohol, drugs can do as far as a rollover. And I know the RCMP in other areas, I can't remember which, maybe it was with bicycles and that, positive reinforcement tickets, right? So it's already been mentioned, around school buses and red lights. So if you're pulling up and you stop behind the red flashing lights on the school bus, you are awarded a positive ticket and a free Slurpee, maybe, I hope. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay. Councillor Wilson?
I was just going to say, I'll make the motion if we're at that point in time.
Please do.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd make the motion that council recommend the mayor forward the 2023-2024 municipal policing priorities to the RCMP as discussed.
Thank you. Everybody's with that motion. It's the 4 items that we're putting forward for recommendation to the RCMP. Okay, I call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion passed. Thank you very much for the discussion. Item 7C, discussion RCMP support. Again, I'll turn this over to CAO Williams for related information.
Thank you once again, Deputy Mayor. This comes to us from January PMP, where I believe Mayor Dahl and Councillor Cummings were discussing the overall support or lack thereof for the RCMP with the potential changes with the provincial police force and whatnot. There has been some movement in the press, the city of Grand Prairie and sheriffs being deployed in downtown Calgary. So it's interesting to see how the government is shifting on this. They have not shared that shift with us. It's just fairly evident when it's done in public. But the discussion today, I think, just revolves around if council wishes to make its support formal and then forward a letter to Alberta Justice Solicitor General. It does not have to do this. You can simply receive for information. I don't believe there's much benefit or adverse effects of doing something versus doing nothing. So general discussion is all that's recommended at this point.
Mayor Dahl?
Thank you, and thank you for sharing the information from March 11th, 2021. It's interesting that this is ongoing, and there's even more information and letters sent as in 23. It's ongoing, and I really would recommend that we move forward with at least stating our opinion, because the more municipalities out of the 300 and how many municipalities in Alberta that at least express their opinion from their councils makes it easier for clarification either way. So I'm highly recommending, and I would like to put a motion on the floor, and we can vote the way you choose.
Go ahead, if you'd like to put a motion on the floor now, we can do discussion questions further on.
I so move that council forward a letter to the Minister of Justice, Solicitor General, in support of the RCMP.
Thank you.
I'm just curious about the 30,000 grant study that we submitted. Probably, have we heard anything back on that?
Actually, there is a slight update. I did get word from the department, so the bureaucracy, that it has been forwarded to the minister's office for approval. Now, the minister does have final say on that, of course, and no timeline yet, but the program staff have recommended our grant for approval, so, but nothing else.
Amanda?
In that case, I'd much prefer to remain neutral on this instead of kind of indicating to the minister that we're probably not in support of, well, I'm not sure what where the province is going. I just would prefer to remain neutral. I'd much rather have a study of the feasibility of either regional or a standalone police force in Olds. It's been 20 years, if not more, that since we've done that. It would be an interesting concept to pursue in my mind.
Mayor Judy, did you have your hand up? No. I would just ask for information or thoughts from CAO Williams, in that it was made quite public through the media with the 2023 provincial budget that there was no money allocated to a provincial policing force in that budget, and that the speculation was that the province was backing off on that. Is that what you're seeing in there as well as in your interpretation, or is this something that may come forward at a later date with a revised adjustment to the provincial budget?
Good question. My opinion only, with no actual facts to back this up. Like I mentioned in my intro to this topic, given the utilization of the sheriffs in municipal districts that already have municipal police forces, such as Calgary and Edmonton, and with the funding for the city of Grand Prairie to phase in a municipal police force, their tone is certainly changing. I don't know where it's going necessarily. With the budget, and I guess that's in my CAO report, one of the things I was going to say there, they do have a significant size surplus in the billions of dollars range. With the election in May, I would bet quite a bit that they're not done announcing the budget yet. Whether that has provincial police implications, it's really for speculation at this point. But it's interesting to see if they're just waiting to after the election to make a final decision or to announce a decision. But Premier Smith that was one of the pillars of her leadership campaign at the nomination stage. So at this point, who knows?
Thank you. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you for sharing that, and it was Premier Smith that apologized and said that she would like to look into it and investigate it deeper. I'm just respecting the fact that on March 11th, 2021, a letter was written of the Council of the Day, signed by His Worship Michael Mazitska, stating that that was what they were looking at, and I'm putting it back on the floor.
Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. My comment was just going to be because the provincial election is looming fast, if we have been tentatively perhaps approved for a grant to do a study, it may not come to fruition before the actual election comes, before the actual election happens. So at this point in time, we do know that it's going to be a tremendous cost to individual municipalities to have a municipal police force. And it's going to be an increased cost, and based on the restricted dollars we already have within our budget, I'm willing to support just staying status quo at this point in time until we do more. And if we are lucky and are recipients of the grant and can do a study and it shows us different, then that's fine. But at this point in time, I would prefer to stay status quo.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a couple of comments, and I am mixed on this particular topic. I agree with Councillor Blatz's comments relative to the costs that would be involved with a municipal or a local police agency. I believe Surrey and their council just recently reversed their previous decision to not leave the RCMP, in part due to costs and what was amounting to a 9.5% property tax increase to help cover those costs. On the flip side, I do like the charm and the appeal of more autonomy, more control, more influence over if we had our own local police agency or police force protective services. So that to me definitely carries some weight and benefit. At the end of the day, I think we all agree around the table there are much broader and bigger reforms that need to happen in terms of the judicial system and how we handle repeat offenders and the causes of crime. And whether they're wearing an RCMP uniform or a Town of Olds uniform, I don't think at the end of the day is going to make much of a difference in that regard unless we take on the other bigger challenges. I would certainly support the second bullet there, that council receives the report for information at this time. We all were at the February engagement session with Price Waterhouse over a year ago, which was largely an organizational governance and oversight review, didn't really address many, I think, of our questions. So to me, given the looming election, given that the questions certainly are out there, numerous in quantity, and the uncertainty around the costs, if Councillor Blatz meant by status quo, receive the report for information, or any, I'm okay with receiving this report for information. Thanks.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I look at it this way. I say, right at this moment, would a letter from the Town of Olds be anything more than a blip on the radar for the from the minister? Would it have an influence on the minister? Probably not. But would a letter from the Town of Olds have a influence on the minister, or whether he agreed to give us a grant? Probably. And so I would say just stay the status quo. I do not believe in going the route of the Alberta Police Force. I think it's going to be exceedingly costly to our province, to our municipality. But my opinion is just my opinion. It doesn't count. It's what our residents want. And so right at the moment, until we do a study, we don't know what the residents want, what would come out of it. And I think we just wait until we get an opportunity to do a study. If we get an opportunity to do a study before something is implemented, who knows? But that's sort of my opinion. I'm in concurrence with Councillor Blatz and Wilson here on the status quo.
Councillor Blatz, did you have your hand up or no? It's fine. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we have a motion on the floor, and we'll proceed with a vote. Those in favor? Those against? motion is defeated. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Blatt.
Point of order,
Looking
then,
for
do
a
we
way to
need
relax
to?
after a long day.
What was that? Well, I guess it's time
In
to
order,
relax.
go ahead.
So then, do we need to make the second motion that council receive this report for information? Then I would make that motion, that
Thank-
council receives this report for information.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. We have a motion on the floor to receive the information as, to receive the report as information. All in favor? Which report are we receiving? This information that we just received upon, like, talking and. Oh, okay, yes. All in favor? Opposed, if any? None?
How would somebody be able to come into our meeting?
That, it could be something being picked up on our microphones from somebody. All right, that takes us to item 8, CAO report. I'll turn the floor over to CAO Williams for that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. And the only item on my report is what's included in written format for just the budget information, which was announced last week. I will just do a very high-level synopsis that overall it was a better budget than what we had seen in previous years, since 2019 or so. It's still not a great budget in my humble opinion, just due to the lack of clarity around capital funding, and certainly the lack of willingness to put MSI and its incoming successor, the LGFF, back to funding levels that we've seen for most of the MSI's life cycle since 2008. It's still at about a 33% cut, which obviously has significant impacts. There was a bit of light with the LGFF that it will be indexed to 100% of provincial revenue growth or revenue decline. 50% was the original target, so that's a small bonus. In terms of funding increases, they are modest in terms of our $38 million budget. The municipal operating grant is set to increase by about $76,000, and the former gas tax, now CCBF, is due to increase by almost $25,000. So not no cuts, which is always nice, and slight increases, which we appreciate. One thing that's not totally clear is municipal policing. That will probably come in the coming weeks. Justice policing, that whole public safety budget that's spread across mostly justice and a bit of municipal affairs, that had received significant dollar increases. It looks like the policing grant got a 11% increase, but I'm not sure if that will translate to 11% funding increase to municipalities. I'd be surprised if it does, but I'm sure news will come out shortly on that. And also attached is just the release that you would have seen from Alberta municipalities. But as mentioned, there's still, I think, $12 billion in unallocated funds and no plans in the budget that I can see to repay any debt. It still remains neutral based on current servicing levels. So again, between now and May, I would bet that you're going to see some fairly directed announcements with that large surplus. But happy to take any questions, which I am probably unqualified to answer, but thanks.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Daley. I just have one question for the CEO, and I don't know if you can answer that, but on page 106, we have the grants in place of taxes, and I'm just wondering, does that have any, do we know whether or not that'll have any effect on any provincial buildings here?
Thank you for the question. And unfortunately not. So GPOT, which the acronym tends to get referred to, it was cut in half, and now they are putting some of that back. The problem with GPOT is that educational institutions and healthcare facilities are exempt from GPOT. So we never had a lot to begin with. So we would see a modest increase, but very, very minimal.
Counselor Wilson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have two short snappers here for the CAO. One is, the report references, I think, MSI operations going from 30 to 60 million. Can you help educate me? I'm not familiar with MSI operations.
So MSI operating grant is the smaller stream of the MSI portfolio. It used to be 3 streams when it first started, technically, operating capital and the BMTG, Basic Municipal Transportation Grant. So that one has since been amalgamated with capital, and you have this very modest funding stream of operating, which essentially, I don't want to say you can use on whatever you want, but we've generally dedicated to utilities at one of our recreation facilities. So whereas capital, the larger stream, obviously is approved projects. So we don't have to apply to use the operating grant. They just trust us to use it. It is a relatively small amount, largely based on population. So urban municipalities do benefit a bit more. But it also has a base amount in it, it used to be $40,000. Regardless of your size, you got $40,000. And from what I've seen, based on the allocation formulas, this was directed at smaller municipalities, smaller than Olds municipalities, to support them in these times. So even though our increase is 27,000, doesn't mean that much to us, to be quite honest with you. Smaller villages, for instance, will see a much larger benefit from the same formula because they have that base fee rising as well.
Supplemental?
Definitely,
Okay.
yes. Thank you, that helps clarify, because, yeah, I had several sub-questions relative, is it truly OpEx versus CapEx, and what's the level of magnitude? So I think your responses has helped me understand that area. My next question concerns, so we heard FCSS is getting 15 million, 10 of which is to go to food banks. My question then is around the other 5 million, and given the presentation we heard an hour and a half or 2 hours ago from Heather Dixon, are we expecting, hoping, thinking there will be additional dollars coming to the municipality? And if so, does that mean our FCSS program becomes even more robust, more dynamic, more huge? Thank you.
Fair question, good question. I'm not sure that particular funding stream hasn't been broken out yet, much like the policing side of it. So it is potential, but it's also important to recognize that we have to match 20% of that. So anything that increases, it has a tax dollar implication on us. So to be seen.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for CAO? Hearing none. Can I ask somebody to put a motion on the floor, please? Councillor Walsh?
I move that we accept the CEO's information as presented.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 9. Do I have a motion? Well, I think that was covered as well. That's what I looked at it. Okay. Item number 9, motion for adjournment. Councillor Blatz, thank you. At 3:42, call for adjournment. Thank you very much, everyone. Great discussion. Good talk. Do we need to vote on adjournment? No, I don't think so.